So this is the one-car garage shop that I've put together. It's largely a machine shop in that it's outfitted for basic manual machine work and other general fabrication, etc. Not all that much space, but I've been able to cram it rather full, so let's have a look. So immediately inside I have this rather disorganized bench, which I've been constructing as a sand mauler for foundry things, but that project has been long and well, it hasn't been in the forefront of what I've been working on. So it has this grate here to let sand fall through when you're bashing open molds, and has this wheel that will spin with that pan on it in the back to with some plows to mold the sand, but that's neither here nor there. So it's right now just sort of a catch-all for the bench grinder, which my very worn wire wheel, because I've been doing a lot of cleaning up of things. So currently these clamps are what I'm cleaning up, but they have a very baked on painting coat on them, so point being they're taking a while. But besides that, I have my pegboard, collection of all my hand tools and such, and that of course needs reorganization. The pins aren't exactly properly secured down, so they pretty much come out as soon as I pick anything out, but I'll deal with that. It's not impossible, but I still need to organize all of it. But again, this is very much a work in progress. But got some adjustable wrenches, some varying types of hammers, a couple big wrenches, a couple smaller wrenches, vice grips, pliers, all the essentials, hacksaw, tin snips, screwdrivers and awls of various description. And then of course I got some dead storage for foundry boxes and forge blower, random tank for air compressing, and a couple of odds and ends. Got my hearing protection, eye protection, the dustpan, and a couple of electrical cords and lamps here. So all of your standard catch-all things that I'll need for just about any project. And underneath the bench, just as a note, we have the chop saw for cutting lengths of steel. That of course gets used outside because it is loud, noisy, and smelly. Moving towards the back, we have sort of the main working area with the lathe. And this is a 1920 abouts Davis lathe, which was made in Rochester, New York. And I bought this on eBay and sort of just took a risk on it because it was in poor shape, but that's most of the machines that I've had. And I didn't know much about machines at the time, and so I thought, oh hey, it's a very cheap machine and I can afford it, and I'll take the risk of whatever it turns out to be. And the problem with that is I have not found hardly any parts for this thing. So there's a couple worn gears here that don't really do so well, and actually this cone pulley was not here. I had to fabricate this up on a lathe and install this because it had a just a V-belt slapped into it, V-belt pulley. And the counter shaft is not original. This is a sort of pieced together thing. And again, it's can't find parts for it because I think I found only about 3 examples of it online. But again, is that it might be rare, but it's not exactly sought after because it's not something that a lot of collectors aren't going to be fawning over something like this. They're just going to say, oh hey, I don't really care. Is that if it was something like a South Bend, or you know, if it was something of more import, then they would, but I like it. It works how it does, and I've gotten a lot of use out of it. Had it since about 2016, so I've completed a bunch of projects on it and such. So, and it is standard tooling. It's Morse taper number 4 in the tailstock here. There's a Morse taper number 5 in the headstock, so it's usable. I have both the lantern tool post here and the tool holders, and a indexing square tool post for the front as well. So not the most tooling, but at least some. And the spindle thread is also something weird. It's like 2 3/8 by 6 threads or something of that. I think that's what it is. But I was able to find this chuck was not with it. I found the backing plate and chuck on eBay, and it fit. So but what was on it is this much bigger outside jaw 3-jaw, and again, it's got a threaded backing plate on it as well. And I was also able to find this faceplate for it, so I generally keep this smaller 3-jaw on it because it's a bit more true, and it's not as much mass flying around. But also, being as this is Morse Taper 4, I've been able to use, or sorry, this is Morse Taper 5. I cut down a adapter sleeve, and this goes in there to turn it to a Morse Taper number 4. The reason that I wanted to do that is I have a set of Morse Taper 4 collets so that I can hold stock sizes, and that's worked out quite well. I have a drawbar, just as you'd expect, goes through the spindle and threads into the collets and tightens it down. So surprisingly, one of the better modifications or sort of adaptations that I've made to the machine, and so I can use collets in it, and it's serviceable, and all those sort of things. Got a couple of measurement gauges and calipers, and really I use, more often than not, I just use these veneer calipers, and the pinchers are really just if I'm need to hold a whole bunch of measurements at one time, but they don't get used that often. I also made up hold on a minute. Made up this from a smaller faceplate, and this is a table to go into the tailstock. So if I was so inclined, thread this on all the way, I can put this in the tailstock and put a Morse Taper drill in the headstock and use the lathe as a drill press. So this was just a machinable blank from McMaster Carr, and it had the Morse Taper. It had the Morse Taper 4 tail on it, and it was just a solid blank up here. And I turned it down and put these threads in it, and I forget what these threads are, but I believe this is a South Bend faceplate. So the faceplate was standard, but these threads were cut, and they're a little bit chattery, a little rough, but yeah, oh well. It is an old machine, and I think that's about as best as I'm going to get out of it. You know, it's not really highly critical. I'm not doing all that precise of work here. So moving on from the lathe, we have the shelvings back here. And this is all just essentially spare equipment and random electrical components and stuff that I've pulled off of other machines. Do have some tooling back here. I've got some end mills and reamers. But all of this stuff is like old pulleys and scale, some oxyacetylene torches, and electrical components from the mill project, and just general stuff that will come in useful, but you know, it's out of the way. I put it up on these stilts here so that I can just get all this stuff underneath of it. I have my bucket of, or one of the buckets of cribbing for blocking things up, moving things. And back here, this whole corner is pretty much motors, spare parts. There's a column from an old drill press back there. And again, another motor. But more parts from the scrap mill here. This is the gearbox and shifting assembly from that, but it's all taken apart. But then looking at the rest of this corner, we have the horizontal milling machine. Now this guy is not currently wired up. This is unfortunately dead as it sits. It's still sort of, I'd call it in working order just because it's mechanically there, but I took the motor out to use in the other mill because it was single phase, and well, I didn't feel like buying another motor for how little I use this. But at the current moment, I'm still hanging on to it because it's an interesting piece. It's from about 1911. It's actually not taking up all that much space. It's not the biggest thing in the world. And it's maybe about, comes up to about a little under my shoulder. So it's hanging around, and I hope to put it back in service at some point, because it does actually, it really takes off metal quickly. It's got these very nice large cutters. It's a 1-inch arbor, and it doesn't have all that much travel, but it's about maybe a 4-foot table, and I get maybe 2 feet of travel out of it. Any sort of auto feed that would be controlled by this gearbox is busted, because there's no, there should be a shaft that links the auto feed in the table to the box back there, but that's been missing, and unfortunately it was quite in a state when I got it, so it's not the best. But again, that's the case with most of my machines. So moving on from the horizontal mill, we have the more useful machines is this nice Buffalo drill press. This is a Buffalo number 20, and it originally had a variable speed drive on it, but unfortunately the other half of it was missing. It was supposed to be mounted, the motor is down here, that was the original motor, and it was missing the other split pulley to complete the second half of the drive system. So what I did is just put a gun pulley up here, and just ran it back to the motor there. And so right now it's just a single speed, and well, I ran it, I geared it slow enough so that, well, it just so that it doesn't tear through anything, because I am using rather large diameter. This is 5/8 and 3/4, so I use it generally for larger drills, so I just go slow, and it's a good machine, plenty of power. I think I put a 3/4, yeah, it's a 3/4 horsepower single phase motor that I've adapted to the plate back here, and I'm not entirely sure of how old this is, because it's not the oldest thing, but again, as happens with the things that I accumulate, is that it's not the most common Buffalo model that I've found out there, and so I haven't found all that much information. I believe it's sort of towards the middle of the last century, so maybe 50s, maybe 60s. But anyway, that's the drill press, and one of the more useful things, because, just powerful for all manner of drilling. And back here, I have a scrap milling table from the parts mill, and that will eventually be a welding table for clamping things and all that manner of things. So that's all, again, lying in wait back here. It's just sort of in storage. And speaking of storage, is we have this whole shelf cabinet thing, and this is all miscellaneous hardware, bits of scrap, fixtures, fittings, electrical components, all sort of things that would be on the shelves back there, but are a little bit more organized in bins. So we have something like, we have bin for springs. What is this? This is bin for beam clamps, or sorry, beam washers, beam clamps, bearings, pulleys, gears, miscellaneous plate, miscellaneous sheet, flat bar scraps, structural bar scraps, thicker plate scraps, round scraps, tube scrap, hinges, handles, machine handles, chain and chain fittings, miscellaneous bolts, oil fittings, gauges, pipe fittings, bigger pipe fittings, random scrap box, tiny arbor press, pulley, another junk box, and another junk box, and some couple of my mine car wheels, and these window weights, which I just use essentially as metal cribbing because they're not that useful for anything else. They just sort of, they're dead weight to block things up. And they come in useful on the arbor press. Get a better view of that. This is a Weaver arbor press from sometime in the 19-teens. I believe the patent date was 16, and it's just about maybe 1 3/4 inch diameter screw and a very large wheel with a bar in the back. Sorry, I kind of had this in a bad spot because I was moving it around, but this goes onto the wheel and goes back and forth with this lever arm and engages with these cogs around here, and will ratchet the wheel accordingly to press it down. So it's all mechanical, no hydraulics, just a big screw. And again, with the window weights is that if I'm supporting something here, I use the window weights to block it up and support where I need it to be, and so that things don't slip and start shooting across the shop after trying to press a bearing out. And I don't know where it is at the moment. I think I misplaced it, but there's I use an old lathe faceplate for a table for this as well sometimes, but it's not the one that's down there. It's over here. It's underneath the extension cord. So this guy, I can't use this on any of my machines because it's the wrong thread, but it was in with the stuff I got from this lathe, so I just use it as a table for this press. So those are the big machines that I have in here. That's the overall space, and thanks for watching, and I will try and keep things updated. Thanks.